Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Marc Medley Show. And this is your host of this podcast, Marc Medley. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It is much appreciated. And the title of today's podcast is I Ain't Mad at Chris Rock at All. Now, I understand the word ain't is not grammatically correct, but the truth of the matter is I ain't mad at Chris Rock at all. And what I'm referring to is his latest comedy stand-up that was just released a little over a week ago or somewhere around that time. I haven't been keeping up with current events because I haven't really gone on social media. I haven't watched the news, but I do know this particular comedy routine came out on Netflix, and the title of that was Selective, Outrage. And Jason Zinoman of the New York Times wrote what I thought was an excellent review, and I totally understood where Chris Rock was coming from. And let me tell you why, because if anything has ever been done to you, or if you've ever been violated, it leaves a void. It leaves a hole. There leaves some resentment there. There is that feeling or that need or desire to get some, quote, get back, unquote. Now, I'm going to do some reading in this particular episode from the review from Jason Zinoman. I'm going to take excerpts from it because it was lengthy, so I'm going to take excerpts from it. But I'm also going to juxtapose it against an excellent book that I am reading by Bishop Desmond Tutu. And his book is the Book of Forgiveness. So I'm going to do the review and do my commentary as to why I ain't mad at Chris Rock at all. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to read some excerpts from Bishop Desmond Tutu's book, The Book of Forgiving. So I'll tell you what, let's get right into it. Because again, one who has been violated, I know exactly where Chris Rock is coming from. Now, if you've been somewhere, no pun intended, under a rock, and you don't know what happened last year at the Oscar Awards, very quickly, very briefly, Will Smith, after a joke that he took as being pointed at or about his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, gets up out of his seat on a worldwide stage and assaults Chris Rock. Chris Rock was the host, and Will gets up out of his seat, goes up on the stage, and hits the man in the face. Now, Chris kind of, took it on the chin. No pun intended. He took it on the chin at the time and hasn't made a lot of noise or a lot of fuss. Every now and again, through some of his routines, he'll reference it or bring it up, but he hasn't really gone in like he did with Selective Outrage. Because, see, that's where kind of what had been stored up or storing up, it kind of came out. And I haven't seen it yet, but after reading a review, I'm going to make it my business to see it at some point. Don't know when, I'm not going to rush, but at some point I want to see it because I can relate to what Chris Rock probably has been feeling for the last year, because I've been feeling pretty much the same way since July of 2021 when a violation occurred with me. So I know I can empathize and sympathize with what Chris Rock felt like being made a fool of on a worldwide stage. So this is the review. Chris Rock's Selective Outrage strikes back. And this is by Jason Zinoman of the New York Times. A year after Will Smith slapped him at the Oscars, Rock responded fiercely in a new stand-up special, Netflix's first experiment in live entertainment. These are excerpts because I said the entire review was somewhat lengthy, so I pulled out the portions that I needed for this particular episode. 1 year later, Chris Rock slapped back hard. It was certainly not as startling as Will Smith hitting him at the Oscars, but his long-awaited response in his new Netflix stand-up special, Selective Outrage, on Saturday night had moments that felt as emotional, messy, and fierce. It was the least rehearsed, most riveting material in an uneven hour. At 58, Rock is one of our greatest stand-ups, a perfectionist whose material, once it appeared in a special, always displayed a meticulous sense of control. He lost it here purposely, flashing anger as he insulted Smith, offering a theory of the case of what really happened at the Academy Awards after he made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's hair. And in what will be the most controversial part of the set, laid much of the blame on her. This felt like comedy as revenge. Rock said he long loved Will Smith, and now, he added, pausing before referencing the new movie in which Will Smith plays an enslaved man, quote, "I watch Emancipation just to see him get whooped," unquote. A commanding theater performer who sets up bits as well as anyone, Rock picked up momentum midway through, while always hinting at the Smith material to come, with a recurring refrain of poking fun at Snoop Dogg and Jay-Z before making clear it's just for fun. Quote, "Last thing I need is another mad rapper," unquote. Here he offers his theory on Will Smith, which is essentially that the slap was an act of displacement, shifting his anger from his wife cheating on him and broadcasting it onto Rock. The comic says his joke was never really the issue. She hurt him way more than he hurt me, quote unquote. Rock said, using his considerable powers of description to describe the humiliation of Smith in a manner that seemed designed to do it again. There's a comic nastiness to Rock's insults, some of which is studied, but other times appeared to be the product of his own bottled up anger. In this special, Rock seemed more raw than usual, sloppier, cursing more often and less precisely. This was a side of him you hadn't seen before. The way his fury became directed at Pinkett Smith makes you wonder if this was also a kind of displacement. Rock often establishes his arguments with the deftness and nuance of a skilled trial lawyer, but he's not trying to give a fair, fleshed-out version of events. He's out for blood. There's a coldness here that is bracing. Describing his jokes about Smith's wife at the ceremony in 2016, he put it bluntly. She started it, I finished it. But of course, as would become obvious years later, he didn't. Did he finish it in this special? Well, we'll see. But I think we're in for another cycle of discourse as we head into the Academy Awards next week. At one point, Rock said there are 4 ways people can get attention in our culture: showing your ASS, and I'm spelling it out, being infamous, being excellent, or playing the victim. It's a good list, but this special demonstrates a conspicuous omission. Nothing draws a crowd like a fight. And these are excerpts from a comedy review by Jason Zinoman in the New York Times. It was dated the 5th of March, 2023. And see, again, because truly we cannot do the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, because we will wind up being a blind, toothless society. So I get that, and I get the spiritual end, I get the religious end, I get the belief end, I get all of that. But at the end of the day, as a human being, when someone does something to you, the natural inclination is to want revenge, is to want to get back, is to want to see the other person in pain just like you are. They've caused you to be in pain, and now you want some pain or some justice to come upon them. That's what I get a feeling is going on here. That while Chris was laying back quietly, he still was singeing. The inside of him was still burning, and I know that feeling. And I also know the feeling of not being able to get back, knowing that it's best not to get back. Because the truth of the matter is, when you hurt somebody else, you wind up hurting yourself. So even when you think you've gotten some get back, you think you've gotten a hit back, I cannot tell you how many times I've dealt with my students in the school that whenever a child hits them, they will make sure they get that quote unquote hit back. They've sat in my office. I said, why did you do that? It's because I had to get my hit back. Well, when did he hit you? Last week, last Wednesday? You're getting a hit back now on the next Wednesday for a hit last Wednesday? Yes. And they have no problem with that, because in many instances out of our homes, what's being told to children is if somebody hits you, you better hit them back. I mean, I've had students in my office that said, if I don't hit them back, I'm going to get hit when I get home. So, I get the indoctrination of if someone hits you, hit them back. Totally understand, and totally understanding the feeling of having been violated, of somebody doing something to you that you have no control over, to be able to get back at them at that moment. Because see, when Will Smith hit Chris Rock, he actually was the bigger man. He didn't strike back because he could have. If he followed the doctrine that my kids follow, Will and Rock, or Will and Chris, would have actually gotten into a fight right there on the air. And see, Chris had enough wherewithal to be able to shake it off for the moment. But he didn't forget that. I know he didn't forget that. And I know deep down inside, it's still probably in there of, you know what, there's more than one way to handle this. And I'm still going to get my get back. And I think that stand-up show the other night was just a part of it. But then there's the other side. The Book of Forgiving, the fourfold path for healing ourselves and our world. And the author of that is Desmond Tutu and Info Tutu. That's Desmond Tutu, Bishop Desmond Tutu, and his daughter, Info. And I think I'm pronouncing it right. I'm not sure. It's spelled capital M-P-H-O. So it sounds phonetically to me like Info. I'm not sure if that's the way it's said, but it's his daughter, Info Tutu, and Bishop Desmond Tutu. One of the most fascinating and insightful books I have read in a long time. The Book of Forgiving. Partly because, just like Chris, I'm dealing with an issue as well. So I'm going to read from that book as well and pose it against, or juxtapose it against, what I just read from the review and why I think Chris Rock did what he did. And to tell you the truth, like the title of the podcast, I ain't mad at Chris Rock. I'm not at all. I'm not judging him. I'm not mad at him. I totally get it, totally understand why he would now want to say, look, you got me last year, but I tell you what, I'm going to get you back this year. All right. From whom do you need forgiveness? And I'm reading from the book. What have you done? Have you hurt someone you love? Does the guilt or shame gnaw at you? Have you caused pain and anguish? Are you trapped in the wreckage of your actions with no visible means of escape? The simple truth is we all make mistakes and we all need forgiveness. We all need forgiveness. There are times when all of us have been thoughtless or selfish or cruel. As we've said earlier, no act is unforgivable. No person is beyond redemption. Yet it is not easy to admit one's wrongdoing and ask for forgiveness. Quote, I am sorry, unquote, with all manner of justifications to excuse what we have done. When we are willing to let down our defenses and look honestly at our actions, we find there is a great freedom in asking for forgiveness and great strength in admitting the wrong. In how we free ourselves from our past errors, it is how we are able to move forward into our future unfettered by the mistakes we have made. We assume it is hard for the person being asked to forgive. It may be harder still for the person seeking forgiveness. When we have done wrong and seek to make it right, we show the depth of our humanity. We reveal the depth of our desire to heal ourselves. We show the depth of desire to heal those we have harmed. Unless you seek forgiveness from those you have harmed, you will find that you are bound inside two prisons, the one you are in physically and the one you have around your heart. It is never too late to repair the harm you have caused. Then, even though you are behind bars, you will still be free. No one can lock away your ability to change. When I harm another, whether intentionally or not, I inevitably harm myself. I become less than I am meant to be. I become less than I am capable of being. When I harm another, I need to restore what I have taken from that person or make a gesture of recompense. I need to restore what I have lost within myself through my harmful words or actions. To recover what has been lost requires that we take an honest look at ourselves and confront our past mistakes. It requires that we admit that we have done and take responsibilities for our actions. It requires a genuine remorse, which comes from understanding how our wrongs have affected others. It requires that we look into our own souls and realize that a person who hurts another is not the person we wish to be. It requires that we be willing to make amends and to do whatever is required to repair the relationship, even if this means never seeing the other person again. If the process of forgiveness is to succeed, we must accept responsibility for what we have done. We must be able to state the truth of what we have done in order to heal the breach in a relationship. We must tell the truth in order to heal the places inside us that break when we hurt another. Kelly Connor was not able to talk about what she did. She was not able to engage in a process that would lead to healing, and it ended up affecting her life in ways she could never have imagined. She said, "When I slept, I had nightmares where demons and angels did battle for my soul. I was confused about how to go on living, why I should be allowed to go on living. I felt completely alone and completely lost, disconnected from the world around me and cast out by all who were supposed to love me. I didn't think I was worthy of having a life because I had taken a life. There was no safe place or safe person to speak to about how I felt. It seemed as if there was no room in the world for a young girl who had done what I did and felt as I felt. Shame, dread, pain, guilt. I know my father also felt guilty for not driving me that day, but he could not speak of it. My family fell apart. My father ended up leaving home 4 months after the accident and vanishing. He died 10 years later. I never saw him again. I never got to say goodbye to him. My entire family died the day I hit Margaret. My friendships died. My joy died. My childhood and my future both died. I wish I had died. I couldn't ask for forgiveness, nor could I forgive myself. Nobody knew the truth of what happened. The police and the courts would not punish me, so I punished myself. I never formed any close relationships because I had this secret. If I became close to anyone, I moved to a new town because I was so afraid they would find out, and I couldn't bear the pain of keeping my secret and living my lie. I was locked up in a psychiatric hospital, and even there, I still couldn't tell anyone my feelings or the truth about what happened. I kept my shame and my secrets locked inside of me for decades. It took Kelly 30 years to admit the wrong and break the silence imposed by her mother on that tragic day. Once she was finally able to admit the wrong, she was able to make space for her own anguish, ask for forgiveness, and finally 3 decades and much suffering later release the relationship. Today, Kelly lives in London and speaks publicly about the accident. She has also written a book, To Cause a Death, about her journey from silence to self-forgiveness. Her life was forever altered, not only by taking a life, but her inability to walk her own. The person who grants forgiveness receives a gift. The person who asks forgiveness receives the healing gift of an honest reckoning. When we seek forgiveness, we hope that our humble admission will help the person we have harmed. We hope that our contrition will heal the relationship we have impaired, so we set out bravely. Even though we are uncertain of the outcome, we know this journey is our only hope for freedom and wholeness. The first step can be difficult. It is not easy to admit our wrongs, but it must be done. As Kelly learned, it is much more difficult to live a lie. It is a burden to carry our secrets and our shame, our guilt, and our remorse. Often the fear of telling the person what we have done is much greater than the reaction we will get from actually admitting the wrong. Only when we can speak the secrets can we hope to banish our shame and live with truth and integrity. This is true whether we've taken a life, stolen from a neighbor, betrayed a spouse, or done any of a host of other deeds of cruelty or thoughtfulness. Now that's again excerpts from the book of Forgiving. And it is written by Desmond Tutu and Info Tutu. The title of the book is The Book of Forgiving, the Fourfold Path for Healing Ourselves and Our World. What I read prior to that was a comedy review by the New York Times of Chris Rock's Selective, Outrage. Now I'm putting the two together because I see both sides of the coin. There is that side, just like Desmond Tutu says, that if we don't learn how to forgive, we're doomed. The entire world, society is doomed. There are times in your quest for revenge that you wind up damaging yourself and the other person. That you really don't feel any better once you get that revenge. The fact that you've now gotten your quote unquote justice does not make you feel any better at the end of the day. You may think it will. You may think, oh, if I could just get them back, but the truth of the matter is, no, you don't feel any better once you get that person back. Now, at the same time, I get it, because when someone has done something to you, that is the natural response, is to hit back. And it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of discipline to indeed not strike back and to forgive. Throughout Desmond Tutu's books, he gives some horrendous examples of folks, family members who've been killed by terrorists. And of the particular little clip that I read was Kelly hit somebody. It was an elderly lady as she was driving down the street that she did not see her. And it was an accident, but she still took a life, and she never really did get over that. But there's stories in there of drunk drivers. There's all kinds of stories that they use for examples of how people forgave the perpetrator. So at the end of the day, and maybe this tour or this stand-up comedy hour will be a part of Chris Rock's healing as well. Maybe, I don't know. But I'm sure he probably felt like, you know what, I got a little bit back. You made a fool out of me last year, but now you know what? I'm getting a little bit back. But now the question comes up, okay, now each of you have made a fool out of each other. What was the outcome? What's the upshot? What are we getting out of that by two African-American males and a female making fools out of themselves? Okay. All right. Well, so again, I ain't mad at Chris Rock. I'm really not. But at the same time, I do understand how forgiveness at some point is going to have to come into play, particularly after reading Bishop Desmond Tutu's book, Forgiveness. Well, that's pretty much the episode for today. Had a wonderful time recording it. Always have a wonderful time whether I'm with you live on my radio show on Saturday mornings or whether I'm recording like I am now for the podcast. I always enjoy communicating with you, even though I cannot speak with you because I'm recording this. Still, just the energy is going out there. The information is going out there. Hopefully some motivation and some entertainment and all of that. But you can hear me live on Saturday mornings from 6 o'clock a.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. on my radio show, The Reading Circle with Marc Medley, because there are a couple of different things. There's The Reading Circle with Marc Medley. That's my radio show. Then there's the podcast, The Marc Medley Show. That's what you're listening to right now. Then we also have our blog, The Critical Thinker. Have that as well. I also have another blog on Medium. So I'm out there. If you put my name in Google, it's out there. But rather than doing that, just go to my website, marcamedley.com. That's MarcAmedley.com. That will put you in contact with all, and I do mean all, of my social media sites, all the platforms that the podcast is on, how to access the blog, how you can access the radio show. And again, the radio show is on Saturday mornings from 6 o'clock a.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. Anywhere in the world, you can access it on gobrave.org. That's GOBRAVE.org. If you're in the northern New Jersey, New York metropolitan area, you can catch the show on FM radio, 88.7 FM. So I thank you for joining me. Hopefully you've listened to this point and hopefully you've gotten something out of it. But again, I ain't mad, and I know it's not grammatically correct. but I ain't mad at Chris Rock.